My name's Joel Goldstein, and welcome to Retail Summit. Today I have Micheael Terpkosh and Bianco. Micheael is an expert in the grocery wholesale industry, and he's a consultant to a lot of independent retailers, while Zell is the president of Interactive Edge, and they specialize in helping retailers and CPG companies present data effectively. So we're going to be diving into a little bit of how to understand your data, how to understand some CPG trends, and learn a little bit about how to make our businesses better. So thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So if we can kick it off, what are some CPG trends that we should be paying attention to in 2020? What's moving the needle?
Well, I'll take that one on. So what we're seeing in CPG trends is a continuation of what I would say is the natural organic growth within the U.S. Natural organic, which used to be much more of a small independent retailer, co-op type retailer that would carry those items, it's now really become mainstream. And as it's become mainstream, more and more consumers are looking for natural organic products, looking for more specialty ethnic type products. And so for an independent retailer or even a large retailer chain, they continue to struggle with what's that right mix of items to have in the store to try to attract those consumers. They can typically get a little bit more margin out of those items, but there's so many things coming on the marketplace. Everybody's hearing about the plant-based meat trends, even the CBD oil trends that are out there. All of that type of stuff is really moving the needle with where the consumers are looking to buy product and what they want to see on the shelf.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would add to that on the data side, what's happening is obviously with omnichannel, there are so many other data sources besides or in addition to the ones that most people are familiar with, which are the syndicated data providers like Nielsen and IRI that also offer, in addition to syndicated data, some custom data as well as panel data. But now you've got, other data companies that are smaller, that are tracking, not only e-commerce, but tracking what's happening in the store, the shopper data, et cetera. And then you've got, as Micheael alluded to, in the natural organic space, you've got SPINS data. So what I mean by that is, for example, one of our clients, Danone, obviously they're using syndicated data from IRI, but they're also using some data from Nielsen and certainly data from SPINS. So the idea of really getting your arms around all these different data sets that can sometimes be disparate is also a challenge that a lot of people are dealing with going into 2020.
Okay, so let me dive into that a little bit. Can you tell me about what IRI data is and what SPINS data is? I don't understand the difference there.
Sure. So with syndicated data, it really covers most retailers, and syndicated data, for those that don't or follow that particular area of the industry, is really scan data, right? It's the data that is collected via scanner and then sold back to Nielsen and IRI, who then aggregate it and then sell it to the manufacturer, right? So when you as a consumer are going into a CVS or a ShopRite, anything that you put across that scanner is obviously collected, and that is pretty much the basic data source that most people use, most manufacturers and retailers use to analyze their data. Okay. And then what's different about that, Joel, is SPINS data covers the natural organic space, whereas Nielsen and IRI have traditionally covered everything in CPG, meaning the sort of traditional grocery products that you would find in mass merchandisers, grocery stores, drug stores, and in some cases convenience stores.
Yeah, and I would add to that for any grocery retailer or really any major retailer in the U.S. that syndicated data gives them an understanding of what's going on in their marketplace, so what's selling to the consumers in the marketplace. So, how many boxes of Cheerios are being sold, say, in the Minneapolis area or the Chicago area. And then to Zell's point, Spins has been very successful as getting into those smaller brands and manufacturers on the natural organic side and being able to talk about what the trends are that are selling with those manufacturers. So it really helps provide a retailer and manufacturers with the direction on where the consumer is going and what's selling to try to fine tune what they're doing in the stores.
Interesting. Okay, and so how can you take that data and make it work for you? How can a CPG brand take that data and boost sales? And how can an independent retailer take that data and boost sales? And quite frankly, how do they access it if they don't want to pay those huge fees that it costs to, get the IRI data?
Yeah, so they're both organizations, both IRI as well as Nielsen, does offer the smaller manufacturer some data, and at a lower cost, I might add. It may not be the full data set that a Kellogg's or a PepsiCo would access, but nonetheless, if they are a smaller retailer trading in a smaller marketplace, they can buy just the data for that market. However, data is just data, and you've got to do something with it. So to your point, Joel, what we try to do as an organization is help clients, whether a retailer or a manufacturer, we do deal with many manufacturers, is the idea that you need to take this data and actually put it into a database where you can manipulate that data, meaning understanding not only what the consumer is buying, but where they're buying it, where they're leaking to other retailers. I mean, there's a wealth of information in that data, but you need a solution that will allow you to analyze that data in a fairly quick way and be able to use that data with your sales organization, with your senior management to make decisions, obviously. And this is the trouble that a lot of people have, is that the smaller retailer, the smaller manufacturer, even the larger ones, they don't have the resources, the skill set to really make that happen on a regular basis. So what we try to do is automate that process and help them put it into a PowerPoint presentation that once it's built, next month they could click a button and it updates the entire presentation, every chart and graph, so that month to month you can see the trends going on and have a much better idea on what you should do when, and what sort of opportunities are there, or sort of what threats you need to be aware of. But without the data and without understanding it in a simple to understand way, you're kind of lost in the sea of data.
Right.
Yeah, and as an independent retailer, that's in a certain market. To Zell's point, I've always worked with retailers over the years, and there's roughly around 3 major ways that they can get better insights into their market. So the first one is what Zell talked about. If you're a retailer and you have a handful of stores, there's an opportunity to go to a Nielsen or an IRI, or even in some cases to a Spins, and trade your POS data to get those category insights or market insights. You're not going to get necessarily any money out of them because you're a smaller operator, but a lot of times these syndicated data providers are interested in getting independent retailer POS data, and in return swap reporting and understanding of your marketplace. The other area I would go to is, are there manufacturers that a retailer is working with to where they can partner with them and say, hey, can you help me understand what's going on in categories where this manufacturer is doing business? So can you go to a General Mills or a P&G or somebody and say, okay, can you help me understand the business? Can you help me understand what to happen in the store, and really partner with them? And then I think there's the third opportunity there to just to be able to get out in the marketplace and understand what's going on, and shop the competition, look at what your competitors are putting on the shelf, what they're doing in their stores, and mimic some of that, or understand that if it's a much larger retailer in a market that's successful, there's nothing wrong with walking those stores and understanding what they're doing, and really trying to make a difference in your own operation, and talking to the people that are shopping your stores and that are shopping elsewhere.
That's an excellent point. 'Cause one thing that I've always noticed that sets a successful entrepreneur up against somebody who is less successful is their ability to get out into the world and to speak to their customer and to go into the stores where, as somebody else would rely on reps and merchandisers to give that feedback. What would you say is the most overlooked aspect when, let's say I have a brand that's competing with Gatorade and I go into a store? What should I look for on the shelf that I can improve about my product that'll give me a boost in sales?
That's a great question to ask, Joel. I just saw some syndicated information from Nielsen here in the last couple of weeks, kind of talking to this, and about a manufacturer really looking at what the competition has on the shelf and trying to differentiate what you have as a brand, as a manufacturer. So if I'm looking at Gatorade, do I have attributes in my product? What's happening with that brand in the marketplace?
Give me 1 second. You just cut out on me over there.
Sorry.
If you could retake that and tell me from the top about that data that you just heard about.
Oh, sure. So, if I'm a smaller manufacturer with a brand and I'm standing in a store and looking at a Gatorade or a Powerade or somebody, I would be looking at what are my attributes that I have in my product that help differentiate myself from those other brands. And in fact, in the last couple of weeks, I saw some reporting on this from Nielsen that I believe you can find online if you go to the Nielsen website. But it basically talks about how to use a manufacturer, look for the attributes and the characteristics in the product, and then be able to socialize those to that buyer for that store or to that retail chain, and about how your product's going to differentiate yourself. And and if you've got some great attributes that consumers are really looking for, that's going to give you a much more powerful sales pitch and be able to talk to a retailer about trying to get on the shelf. A lot of retailers today are looking for those mid to smaller size brands to get on the shelf because that's where they're seeing a lot of their growth. The really large CPG companies, their growth is very slow or very flat, and all the growth in grocery is coming from these smaller, medium-sized brands because they're doing a much better job understanding what the consumers really want.
That's interesting.
Yeah, let me just add one other sort of side note to that, or anecdote. So there's a company here in New York City that I know of, that it's two women that started a beer company called Talea. And so two women-owned craft beer. They set up in Brooklyn. Number one, the product is excellent, right? So the product's got to be good.
Yeah.
But they are two young entrepreneurs, well-educated, et cetera, both in corporate America, and they decided to start this craft brew, and they've just opened up a brewery, as I said, but they're already in Whole Foods, right? They're already in many of the smaller markets here in New York. So what did? Number one, they had a good product. Number two, they differentiated themselves as two women that started it, and they've already raised $2 million, right? So they're going to go places, right? And then eventually, maybe they'll be purchased by, InBev AB or somebody else, or go the other way. Constellation Brands just sold off Ballast Point because Ballast Point doesn't want to be looked at as a big, huge brand owned by Constellation. They want to be known as a smaller craft brand. So, to that question, Joel, what is an entrepreneur to do? I think it's become easier today in certain markets to do that very thing that you talked about, where you can stand out, and you're not looked at by the retailer like, well, who are you? You're not an AB, you're not a Miller Coors. I mean, the fact that you're not will help you get into that store. It's the same way with some of the products and brands that Kellogg's and other companies are buying, the smaller brands, I really think have a great opportunity moving forward, especially with the millennial community, et cetera. Things that are natural craft, I think have a good place in the marketplace today, and I think that the smart retailers will spark to that.
Right.
Well, I'll chime in on one other thing here from a retailer point of view with these smaller manufacturers is, you can walk into any grocery store in the U.S. today, and everybody is selling Tide, everybody's selling Cheerios. There's all these national brand items, and so those items have become very much a commodity, and their price is a commodity. So the margins are very slow, including being able to buy them online. The retailers are really liking these smaller, medium-sized brands because it's helping to differentiate their store. And they're also seeing consumers that are really looking to move away from these larger CPG brands and want to try something new, something unique, something local.
Right.
And so the ability to, shout out those attributes and the ownership on the shelf as a manufacturer. So the labeling is very important. The signage is very important. Working with that retailer, it does make a world of difference today, where say 10, 15 years ago, it was very, very difficult for a small manufacturer to try to break in, even into one market, break into a retail store operation.
And just one other quick thing on that. This translates to e-commerce as well, right? Because when a shopper is shopping online, they're doing exactly what Micheael is talking about. They're searching the attribute, not the category, right? So if you can think about that in store as well, it makes sense because, when you're shopping, you're not saying, I want to buy toothpaste online, right? You're shopping for, I want a whitening, a sensitive, and even more granular than that. And if you study e-commerce, you'll see that is happening, and that can translate in the brick and mortar world as well.
Now, I think what you guys are talking about are tapping into micro audiences. That's a trend that we've been seeing where, you try to focus on, toothpaste without, fluoride or, specific audiences and what they're looking for. How can brands keep track of those kind of trends, and how can they stay ahead of that curve?
I think smaller manufacturers and brands today have a much better opportunity in staying on top of what's going on out there in their markets, simply because of being able to use the internet. An individual or a small manufacturer, you can go out and subscribe to getting Nielsen, IRI, spins reporting on a regular basis, and it's all free. You sign up for their newsletters. They send you an email with a link on a daily, weekly, periodic basis. And so you're able to get really a huge amount of information out there. And so as a small, I think, brand manufacturer that wants to understand what's going on with consumer trends and are they staying on top of that, go out and look for different opportunities to sign up for different newsletters, different webinars, different types of websites that can really give you a huge amount of information and really help arm you to understand what's going on. And then, Joe, I think back to your the micro groups of consumers. I think that's also important for a small manufacturer, that if I'm going to walk into, say, one or two retailers in a given market, trying to understand who are the consumers of those stores, and are those the right retailers to really try to break into that market. Zell's example of sensitive toothpaste. Well, if I'm in a really up and coming young area that I'm trying to get into stores, that might not be the right audience for that type of product versus more of a suburban or an older type neighborhood that's looking for a different type of dental care. So again, I think just understanding who's in the neighborhood, who's shopping that store, also helps that manufacturer trying to, almost rank and differentiate who they want to try to get into first.
And one of these trends that we're seeing, which I don't think is going to be a micro audience, but more of an overall trend, is going to be sustainability. That's what everybody's talking about for moving into 2020, and we're seeing internationally, getting rid of single-use plastics and so on. How is that going to change the industry for brands themselves and for how it's going to affect the retailers?
Well, I mean, one of the things that I'm seeing is, and we touched on it earlier, is one of our clients is Danone. They're the Danone company. They're now known as Danone. Um, First and foremost, they are the largest B Corp in the world, right? And they are really trying to, as we touched on earlier, plant-based, buying a lot of smaller brands that they're bringing into their portfolio. But you bring up a good point, Joel, and that is, the sustainability. And we're seeing with some of our clients, in addition to the analytics that we're setting up for their sales organization to present to the retail buyers across the country, a category review, a joint business plan, a new item launch. We're also seeing sustainability presentations and what they're doing to sustain, and be good sort of corporate and world citizens, right? So we all worry about that. And I see, being here in New York, people are getting Amazon packages every single day. I worry about those boxes piling up. I worry about, when you walk out of a big building like this here in New York and you see everybody walking out, coming back in with these bags and boxes for their lunch. I mean, we've got to find a way to make it a little bit more environmentally friendly, or all of this good work about where it's coming from, are you putting the right things in your body, et cetera. It all kind of rings hollow to me when we're not doing something about all the paper that the food is coming in or being shipped in. And we've really got to do a better job of that, because if we're not doing it, you could only imagine what's happening in the rest of the world. And I don't think we're doing enough.
So you're advocating buying Tesla stock. That's what I'm hearing.
I'm sorry?
You're advocating buying Tesla stock.
Well, it's really an issue that, now that I have a granddaughter, I worry about, because Amazon is not doing enough about it, nor are many other, online sellers. And it's a problem that we're all going to have to face.
And Zell, I think, hit on a great point there, which is the sustainability piece. Is you have a lot of consumers out there that have really, felt good about where they've moved to with buying organic, natural products and what they're eating. Are they local? What's it doing to the environment? And there's almost been this other aha moment now going, well, you know what? How is this stuff packaged? Is it in glass versus plastic? Is it in a compostable or cardboard box that I could recycle versus it's just going to go into the landfill? So for that manufacturer, I would definitely also be looking at what's the packaging you're using and play that up. And one thing also back for the manufacturer that they're trying to get into retail, if you've got a better for you or natural organic product, there are retailers today that will turn that product around in a presentation and count the number of ingredients. And if you're over a certain number of ingredients on the label, you are not going to get on the shelf. I mean, that's kind of what it's coming down to. The buyers today in these retailers are very knowledgeable in additives and ingredients, beyond, what the product looks like and how it tastes, or what it's going to do for the consumer. So I think between the packaging, your ingredients, and then that consumer audience you're really trying to sell into is really going to help you with those retailers that are looking for new things.
Seeing that buyers are much more knowledgeable on consumer trends and what they're looking for, but there's still a pretty big gap as far as what buyers are buying and what consumers want, that is being closed online, but not so much in the retail stores. How can that gap get closed between the retail buyers and the shoppers?
I'll just use the Minneapolis market as an example for up here. There's been a number of small manufacturers that really kind of, I won't say go around the retail channels, but really had to look at being innovative. So, they started, showing up and buying a booth at the farmers markets in the summertime. There was A major popcorn manufacturer up here now that's been very successful, female owned. She started out selling popcorn on the street outside of Twins baseball games, and now she's selling within the stadium and in all the retail stores. So, Chick-a-Boom, popcorn and stuff. So I think some of these folks need to get innovative, and I think that's also a good testing or lab for them, that before they really try to launch and spend a huge amount of capital and money and get into the retail space, try it out in the farmers markets, on the street, go to the, local craft fairs and stuff and have a booth and really get a lot of consumer feedback. And I think that builds your brand, builds your case to get you in stores in a given marketplace.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if you just walk the Natural Organic Show, either in Baltimore or in Anaheim every year, it's just astounding the amount of small brands that are really great tasting, whether it be chocolate, whether it be, kombucha, whether it be another coffee, or there's a lot of brands out there that, as Micheael said, the more exposure that you can get, you will get into retail eventually. But there's ample opportunity to start with the smaller retailers, the farmers markets, obviously even before, but then getting into the natural markets, the independent natural markets, before even trying to get into Whole Foods, for example. And there's a lot of innovation. You walk that show, there's aisles and aisles of just products for pets, right? Organic and natural products for pets. And then we touched on the CBD craze. But there's more opportunity. I agree with Micheael that, 15, 20 years ago, it was a lot harder to knock on the door of retail. Now, being smaller makes you a little bit more attractive, because the Kellogg's of the world, the big boys, they're not innovating as fast as they would like, and that is why they're going out using their pocketbook to buy some of these smaller brands, right? Because that's the only way that they're going to sort of stand out. Because if not, it's pretty flat. Yeah, the Tides of the world, the Kellogg's of the world, but where's the innovation going to come from? And it's going to come from the younger, smaller brands that are going to bring some new thinking into the organization.
Well, and what's nice about some of these smaller retailers and co-ops is they're actually using some of these brands now as kind of part of their marketing campaign, that they are supporting local, that they are supporting the local manufacturers. And so you see it in their signage in their stores, you're seeing it in their leaflets or magazines they put out on a regular basis. So there's definitely this camaraderie partnership to help these manufacturers and small brands really establish themselves in marketplaces, and it's good for the retailer too.
Yeah, I'll give you one other example. One of our clients is on the smaller side, Red's Burritos, right? And it's small, natural, organic burrito brand. And you walk around different stores and you'll see that they are really in a lot of doors. They've got a wide portfolio now, and they started out just having burritos, but now they've got all kinds of meal solutions, etc. And again, they've maintained that small, natural, organic look and feel. And here in New York City, they're in most major retailers now. So, and they didn't start out that way. Another one of our clients is Zevia Natural Soda out of California. A natural sugar-free soda that is competing with the big boys in many, many markets across the country, and they're getting bigger and bigger.
Excellent point, and it kind of brings me to my final question, which is, we're seeing that a lot of products are launching from online into retail and not the opposite way now. What would be your advice to somebody that's coming from an online base going into retail, speaking to maybe a regional grocery buyer or a national buyer? How would they take that leap?
Oh, I'll take that one first.
Sure.
I actually have a good friend that's been in the consulting business for a number of years and works with a number of small manufacturers that are wanting to crack into the grocery business. And so, Joel, part of your question is if they're starting online, they're selling some, let's say, through Amazon or some other places, or even as we talked about earlier, a brand that maybe done well in a given marketplace. A lot of people who do well fail when they try to get into the grocery channel because they don't really understand it. And it's very difficult if you're not in the industry to understand the complexity of the industry, not just having a great product, but the distribution channels and running it through a warehouse, or how do you get it to the stores, and what's your trade promotions and your shrink rates, and a lot of things that go along with trying to establish a brand. And so I'm not advocating to go out and find a consultant or somebody to help you, but if there's a way for these small brands, whether it's been in one or two markets or online trying to break into the grocery business, really try to go find somebody that can help you maneuver through that. Talk the talk in the sales calls, help you understand what you need to distribute the product, how are you going to gear up your production if all of a sudden, wow, you get into a major retailer and they want to put you in all their stores. So,
would you recommend starting small with independents, or does that not offer any benefit?
No, I don't think it. I think whether you start small and independent are successful, or you start online are successful, when you want to make that step into what I'll call the grocery retail channel and expand into other markets, and as El talked about some of the brands he works with expanding, that's very painful and can be very difficult if you don't at least have somebody that understands the business that you can talk to and help you maneuver through that. And I've seen brands, this friend of mine has seen brands where it's a great product, but they end up not being able to make that leap because of the mistakes that are made, or the capital that's needed, or the intensity of trying to gear up that production when you want to move beyond, one online presence or a small retailer. So I do say they folks need to try to find expertise or help to help them kind of plot that journey and what does that growth rate should be over the course of time. Otherwise, it can be really, really tough on that entrepreneur.
Yeah. What I would add to that is just another thought that even whether you're starting online or whether you're starting with brick and mortar, in today's world, quite frankly, you almost need both, right? And what I mean by that is there's some large brands that say, well, I don't need to worry about e-commerce because I'm number one or number two in my category, right? But that simply doesn't hold water, because if you're not looking at what's happening online in the e-commerce world, you're still in e-commerce, you're just not in control of it. Because you think about all the third-party sellers on Amazon, right? We're starting to do with another partner web scraping, right? To understand kind of pricing, because what happens a lot of times is you've got a major brand, and these third-party sellers are taking those brands, repackaging them, and then when the consumer gets them, they may be out of date, they may be stale, and who are they going to go back to? They're not going to go back to that third-party seller, or even Amazon in most cases. They're going to go back to the manufacturer whose brand it is. And so if you're not in control of that, all of a sudden your brand equity can start to erode. So it's become a somewhat difficult world to navigate, but nonetheless, you have to be aware of it.
Well, that's a perfect example, and I truly appreciate both of your time. So, Micheael, Zell, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Having us.